Our topic for this week's slide presentation is Known or Knowing Publics, Social Media Data Mining, and the Question of Public Agency. This is an article by Helen Kennedy and Gilles Moss. And the article basically presents or puts forward the issue of data mining and how it constitutes to a central agency exercising more of a central power on what sort of data is getting mined. And based on this issue, it provides solutions, possible solutions at least, for decentralizing this data mining collection by giving the public greater power over their data than corporations and government agency. And there needs to be regulation, availability, and accessibility to all, but also in a more reflexive, active, and knowing public discourse. A bit about the authors. Dr. Helen Kennedy is a professor of digital society at the University of Sheffield. Her research has been informed by forms of digital inequality and related mechanisms for change and resistance, for example, class, gender, race, disability, digital labor, digital identity, and digital representation. Helen is currently interested in how big data and datafication are experienced by non-expert folk as part of their everyday lives and strategies for living with data. Dr. Gilles Moss is an associate professor of media and politics at the University of Leeds. His research falls into two broad areas, political communication and media policy. In both areas, he is interested in relationship between media and politics, focusing either on the media's role in politics or how politics shapes media. Common themes in much of his work are the democratic implications of media and the role of public deliberation and engagement in politics and policymaking. As stated earlier, the article introduces the concern of data mining, where the increasing availability of data on users and their online behavior, the decreasing cost of collecting, storing, and processing data, and the exponential expansion of social media platforms from which much of this data is taken, mean that at least in theory, an increasingly diverse range of actors can mine social data. There have been new methods to analyze social media data, which often provide a powerful way to know the public and capture what they say and do. For example, whenever we open Instagram, it accesses our camera and microphone, which is also a data, and most of the times that gets stored in the metadata servers, where knowingly we consent to these policies where our data is getting stored when we download the app and agree for its usage. So it is around that discourse where the article comes in. And it also poses another perspective where access to these methods is uneven, with corporations and governments tending to have the best access to relevant data and analytic tools. These are often disguised as to enhance the user experience on said platforms while having access to the user data. Again, the paper proposes different approach to data mining, where the public has greater power hold on their data than corporations and government agency. Data mining and analytics need to be democratized in three ways. They should be subject to greater public supervision and regulation, available and accessible to all, and used to create not simply known but reflexive, active, and knowing publics.
Before we delve further, it's important to keep in mind the terms known publics and knowing publics. Kennedy and Moss highlight the difference between the two when explaining that they characterize the battle over data power as being about a move from known publics, who are subject to the data mining practices of powerful groups, to knowing publics, who are more active and reflexive agents. Simply put, known publics would be the groups of the general public that emerge as a result of data mining, such as a demographic targeted for advertising, whereas the knowing publics have some agency or control. The general sentiment on social data mining is that this is a bad thing. But why exactly? Is it because Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, now Meta, announced that in the age of social media, privacy is no longer a social norm in 2010? Kennedy and Moss highlight the following concerns. First, that social media data mining is a breach of privacy and a form of surveillance. They reference Trottier's 2012 paper, which argues that since social media data mining gives insight into the personal, private lives of people, it is a new form of surveillance. The second concern is that digital divides are created. They reference Boyd and Crawford's 2012 paper that suggests that by limiting access to big data, in this context being social media datasets, new digital divides are being created, since those with money or inside a company have differential access to social media data from those without financial resources or operating outside the major companies. Another type of divide is that where access to data mining expertise, as well as to data themselves, is uneven, and this produces new digital divides in relation to access to data, tools, skills, and expertise. The final concern is that social media data mining provides the already powerful with control over how network publics come to be represented and understood. And by network publics, we mean groups of the general public that are formed through social media, whether it is a certain demographic or a fandom. Now that we understand the key problem, Kennedy and Moss propose a three-point solution, emphasizing that it will only work when they are used together. The first point, there must be public supervision and regulation. Kennedy and Moss propose that the public must know and understand what social media data mining is and how it works in order to have more agency. This alone would not be enough, since the algorithms and methodologies for data mining may be proprietary and not always clear. A solution could be to ensure that the companies themselves are regulated and held accountable. However, this then relies on a system of government to enforce it. They therefore suggest that the public needs to be involved in determining how data mining will be regulated if regulation is to be legitimate and enjoy public support. Point 2. There must be availability and accessibility. Kennedy and Moss introduced the concept of open data, or data that is freely accessible and available to the general public. However, this introduces the problem of ethics and privacy when it comes to data mined from social media. To address this, they reference Bach's 2015 statement that open data advocates believe that personal data, that is, data which allows persons to be identified, should not be made open in the same way as other data. The third and final point, it must be used in ways for the public to understand each other. Kennedy and Moss proposed that for data mining to be democratized, it should be a resource for members of the public to understand each other, reflect on matters of shared concern, and to decide how to act together as publics. In other words, social media data mining and the resulting data should be used by the public to better understand public issues, as well as one another, in order to make better decisions together. They highlight the Reading the Riots project by the Guardian newspaper as a key example of this in action, where the project team used data from Twitter to find that what was widely reported elsewhere was false. Specifically, that Twitter was used to organize riot cleanups more than riot organization, and that there was no link between the riots and poverty. Data mining and analytics are not only mechanisms for knowing publics, but can be means by which publics can know themselves.
And so for the conclusion, Kennedy and Moss talk about how concerns about data mining in terms of increased surveillance and privacy invasion, related opaque forms of discrimination, social sorting, and control over the way the public is represented are now being followed by calls to do data mining differently and democratize data power. Greater transparency and accountability of data mining are proposed as mechanisms to facilitate public understanding, debate, and action in relation to data mining. Similarly, to address concern about access to data practices, technologies, and expertise, there have been calls for data and data mining to be more accessible and available as a common public good. Open data movements offer one, albeit not straightforward, example of this principle in action. But as yet, considerations of how it might apply to data mining and to social media data are somewhat limited.
The question that Andrew Feenberg asked in his preface to Transforming Technology: must human beings be submitted to the harsh logic of machinery, or can technology be fundamentally redesigned to better serve its creators? This is something we should keep in mind going forward.
That is true. So now we pose two questions for discussion. One of them is simple thing: does viewing each other's profiles on social media or any other platform constitute to data mining?
Question 2 is that Kennedy and Moss suggest that two types of digital divides that form as a result of social media data mining is the divide between those with money and or influence in a company having differential access to data than those without, and the divide between those with the opportunity to learn data mining skills, tools, and expertise and those without. What other forms of digital divide can emerge as a result of social media data mining?
And that's it for our presentation. Thank you guys for watching.
Thank you.